Our scripture for this evening comes from Hebrews chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. Again, Hebrews chapter 3, verses 12 and 13. Many of us are into things like magic shows. Sometimes they call it an illusion, tricks, things of that nature. People may say that they're not interested in those things, but magicians are known to make a lot of money. The richest and highest paid magician right now is David Copperfield. He has a net worth of somewhere around $875 million. He owns about 11 islands in the Bahama area. Forbes magazine says that in the year 2018 alone, he made $61 million. Other high-paid magicians include people like Penn and Teller, David Blaine, and Criss Angel, all of whom command salaries in the amount of millions. It is interesting that people pay and pay good price for someone to deceive them. But deceitfulness can be fun when you're talking about a David Copperfield. But when you're talking about something more important, like Satan deceiving us, there's certainly not a time for a laughing matter. Consider these words in Hebrews 3, verses 12 and 13. Because we often say when we see a magician, how did he do that? We have to also wonder, how did Satan deceive us, or how does he deceive us? Listen to these words. Take heed, brethren, lest there be any of you an evil heart of unbelief in departing from the living God. But exhort one another daily, while it is called today, lest any of you be heartened through the deceitfulness of sin. Again, when we have been tricked, we often say, how did he do that? What did David Copperfield or Penn and Teller, David Blaine, Criss Angel do? How did they do that? Well, how they do what they do is not as important as understanding how Satan does what he does. The word deceitfulness found here in Hebrews chapter 3 and verse 13, it means to make a false impression, to offer a delusion, that the person who is doing the deceiving is motivated by trickery. So let us not underestimate the devil's intentions toward us. He means us no good. Allow me to explain an answer to how did he do that, so that we can recognize how Satan works to deceive us. There are at least 4 things that can cause deceit and allow us to fall into sin. Number 1, Satan allows us to become desensitized. The way that he gets us through desensitizing us is to constantly expose us to sin. For example, it may be in the music, it may be in movies, it may be in television, it may be in our social circles. But the more that we are around it, the less we become affected by it. It's kind of like a fragrance or other things that we could be around that we notice at first, and after a while, we no longer even pay attention to it. That's what Satan does, is he deceives us by desensitizing us. The second means by which he deceives us is to destigmatize things. In other words, we know that sin is dangerous, sin is deadly. But if he could remove the stigma and give us the false impression that it is not as bad as we say, then the stigma is removed and we're more apt to indulge in sin. Dr. Carl Menninger, in his book called Whatever Happened to Sin, says we need to start calling sins sins, because when we use alternative words and euphemisms and other descriptives to describe sin, What we actually do is we destigmatize it and we make it more socially acceptable. So be careful about not calling sin what it is. The third thing that Satan does is that he causes us to empathize with sin. That is, he plays on our feelings or our emotions. As an example, one of the things you often hear in the LGBTQ plus community is that these gay couples have more love between them than some of the heterosexuals in your church. Or the news will go out of their way to show us the mistreatment of a gay person and how they have been attacked and brutalized. And that certainly is designed to elicit empathy from us. While we are never happy to see such brute behavior and such mistreatment of people, the intent of the deceiver is to draw on our feelings of empathy and to start to empathize in such a way that we start to accept it. The last way that Satan deceives us is through legalizing things. It is a proven fact that when things like marijuana, for example, are legalized, or other things that we might consider to be sinful, pornography, various things that are legal but are not necessarily moral, it causes in the minds of people a sense of acceptance. Because why would a civil government legalize something that is bad for us? So, as you consider these examples, again, remember that Satan works through deceitfulness. He desensitizes us, he destigmatizes things, he draws on our feelings and emotions through empathy, and then he also works through legalizing. We may not know how David Copperfield and the other magicians do what they do, but if we take heed, we can better understand how Satan does what he does. How did he do that? He's doing it every day. Be careful so that we're not caught up in the trap of Satan's deceit. This has been another installment of A Few Minutes with the Minister.